The town of Hartwell isn't on any modern map. Locals say it burned down in 1949, but last night I drove straight into it, and everyone there kept calling me by name. The lighthouse keeper's promise. The wind over the coast of Maine had a way of speaking to people. Not in words exactly, but in a language made of drifting fog, crashing waves, and that faint metallic groan of the distant lighthouse turning its ancient lens. Locals said the Atlantic carried memories, stories soaked into the sea like ink swirling in water. Outsiders rarely believed them. Outsiders didn't stay long. But Nathan Hale was no outsider. He had been born on these cliffs, raised under the constant call of the ocean. And though he had spent most of his adult life running from this place, he had returned now at 32, pulled back by a letter written in a trembling hand. Nathan, your father is gone. Lighthouse needs a keeper. Come home. Mrs. Waverly. He had read it twice before admitting the truth. The one place he thought he'd never see again was calling him. His father, Alan Hale, had been the lighthouse keeper for nearly 40 years. People said no one knew the sea better, no one respected it more, and no one feared it more, though he never admitted why. There had been stories, legends that Nathan dismissed when he was younger. Stories of the night Alan Hale rescued a shipwrecked crew during a violent storm. Stories of a promise he made on that night, a promise that changed him. Nathan returned expecting grief, quiet halls, maybe a few neighbors offering their condolences. He found something else entirely. The lighthouse stood tall, lonely, and strangely alive under the morning fog. Its paint was cracking, rails rusted, yet the glass of its lantern room gleamed unnaturally clean, as if someone had wiped it only minutes earlier. The cottage door wasn't locked. Inside he found an old radio humming softly, though no one stood near it. Half-read books lay on the table. A jacket hung on the back of the wooden chair. The kettle on the stove, long cold, still had tea leaves inside. His father had lived his final days as if he were waiting for someone, or something. Nathan scoped the place silently, touched by memories he thought he had buried. The smell of salt, the creak of floorboards, his father's handwriting on the logs pinned to the wall. Feb 3, light behaved strangely. Feb 7, fog came early. They are restless tonight. Feb 11, heard singing, not the wind, not human. Nathan blinked. He remembered Alan Hale as perfectly rational, precise, disciplined. Not someone who believed in stories. But the last entry chilled him. Feb 14. Tonight they will come. I promised them once. The sea remembers. What promise? To whom? As the coastal wind pressed against the windows, Nathan tried to shake the unease crawling up his chest. Grief made people imagine things. Maybe his father was only lonely. Losing touch. Spending years in isolation would do that. He unpacked, lit the lantern, and stepped toward the lighthouse. The spiral staircase wound upward like a rib cage, the smell of oil and salt heavy in the air. The beacon above hummed faintly, its massive lens still rotating, even though power to the tower had supposedly been cut days after his father's passing. "How are you running?" Nathan whispered. He flicked the switch. The beacon dimmed for 2 seconds, then surged back to life, brighter, sharper, almost watchful. He felt suddenly unwelcome. The first night. Nathan didn't sleep well. The wind sounded different, not wild, not angry, but patterned, like a rhythm. Almost like breathing. Sometime near midnight, he sat up, heart pounding.
The fog outside had thickened into something resembling moving shapes. He pressed his face to the window. Just fog, he told himself. Then the lighthouse light swept across the cliff, and he saw them. Figures, pale silhouettes standing near the edge. Dozens, motionless, staring toward the lighthouse. As the beam passed again, they were gone. Nathan backed away from the window. His father's journal echoed in his mind. Heard singing, not the wind, not human. He tried the radio to distract himself. Only static came through, soft at first, then sharper, until the static itself began forming a pattern like whispering underneath. Nathan? He froze. Nathan. The voice was faint but unmistakable, female, gentle, calling him the way someone would call a child who wandered too close to danger. He switched the radio off instantly. The whisper continued, not from the radio, from outside. A cold rush swept through him. He moved slowly toward the door, every instinct screaming not to open it. Then he heard it again, now clearer, almost melodic. Nathan, you have his eyes. He burst outside before thinking. The fog swirled around him, thick and wet. The lighthouse behind him cast slow, sweeping arcs of light slicing through shifting shapes. "Who's there?" Nathan shouted. The sea answered with a long, grumbling growl. And then from the mist, a figure emerged. Not ghostly, not blurred, but solid. A woman, barefoot, wearing a long sea salt-stained dress, hair dark and tangled, eyes glimmering like wet stones. She looked almost human. Almost. "You came back," she said, with a voice that was familiar and impossibly old. "Just as he promised you would." Nathan staggered back. Who are you?" She smiled softly, too softly. "Your father kept the light for us, for years, but he cannot keep it now. The sea remembers every debt." A wave crashed violently against the rocks below, though the tide wasn't high. "What debt?" he demanded. The lighthouse beam swept over her face, and for a split second her features shifted. Not monstrous, but ancient, ageless, eyes deep as the trench. "Ask the sea," she whispered. Then she stepped back into the fog and vanished. The promise. Nathan didn't sleep at all after that. By dawn, he stood clutching his father's journals, flipping through pages desperately. Near the middle, he found it. A long entry, written shakier than usual. "Years ago, during the storm of '94, a ship went down. I was keeper then. I saw 3 figures in the waves, struggling. I climbed down the rocks, tied myself to the winch, and went in. But the water wasn't right. The waves carried voices. Hands colder than ice pulled me deeper. They saved me. Not the crew, them. The ones beneath, the ones who live where the sun never touches. They said they would grant my life in return for a promise. Keep the light burning. When the blood of your blood returns, we will collect what is ours." Nathan felt the air drain from his lungs. Blood of your blood. Him. He stumbled back from the table, shaking. His father had made a deal with something in the ocean, and now the debt had come due.
The second night. Nathan considered leaving, packing now, running inland, disappearing entirely. But part of him felt a pull, like gravity, that held him here. His father had spent his last breaths caring for this lighthouse. Abandoning it felt like betrayal. And the sea did not forget betrayal. He stayed. That night the singing grew louder. It wasn't one voice, it was many, dozens, hundreds, a chorus rising from the waves like a forgotten hymn. Nathan stepped onto the rocks cautiously. Fog rolled around him. He gripped a lantern, though its light felt tiny amidst the encroaching dark. Near the cliff edge, the same woman from before appeared, this time with others behind her, half visible through the shifting mist. "You should not fear us," she said softly. "Your father did not." Nathan's voice cracked. "What do you want?" She reached out, not touching him, but close enough he felt the air change. "What was promised? Come with us. It will be gentle." "Why me?" "Because the sea granted a life once, and life must be repaid." "No, no, I won't." Her expression didn't darken, but the water below suddenly began to churn violently, waves clawing the rocks like great hands. The sea does not accept refusal. She took one slow step forward. Nathan ran. He sprinted across the rocks, slammed himself inside the cottage, bolted the door, and pressed his back against it, chest heaving. The voices outside rose higher, soft, melodic, relentless. "Nathan, Nathan, Keeper's son, come home." He covered his ears, but it didn't help. The sea was calling him from inside his mind. The lighthouse awakens. Hours passed, or minutes. He couldn't tell. The singing faded, and silence returned, heavy and unnatural. He forced himself to stand and stumbled toward the lighthouse again. He had to shut it down, break its lens, do something, anything that would break whatever connection his father had created. At the top of the tower, he moved toward the control box. Then the entire lighthouse shuddered. The lens sped up, rotating wildly, faster than any mechanical equipment of this age should be capable of. Light burst outward in unnatural pulses, flickering like a heartbeat. "Nathan!" He spun around. No one was there. "Nathan!" The voice came from the glass itself. The lens reflected not his face, but his father's. Alan Hale stood inside the reflection, pale, soaked, eyes shining with something between sorrow and warning. "Son, you cannot run. They kept me alive long enough to raise you, long enough to prepare you. I made the promise. You must..." The reflection warped, twisted, then shattered into blinding white light. Nathan fell backward, cracking his elbow on the floor. When his eyes adjusted, the reflection was gone, but a new voice echoed from the stairwell below. "Human." "Mr. Hale?" Nathan froze. Someone was inside the lighthouse. Very slowly, he looked down the spiral stairs. A man in a Coast Guard jacket stood halfway up, flashlight in hand. "Sir, we saw your light acting up. Thought you might need help." Nathan's entire body sagged with relief. For the first time in 48 hours, something made sense. Yes, please. I think something's wrong with the lighthouse's electricity system."
The officer nodded and began climbing. He made it 5 steps before stopping. Not frozen, not hesitant, just suddenly still, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Nathan frowned. "Are you okay?" The officer's head twitched strangely. Then, in a voice far too fluid, too old, he answered, "The sea does not forget." Nathan's blood iced over. The officer looked up, and his eyes were not human. They shimmered like deep water. He lunged. Nathan scrambled upward, slamming the lantern room door and yanking the steel bar across. Something crashed into the door instantly, shaking the entire platform. "Nathan!" the voice crooned from outside, no longer the officer's voice. "You cannot hide." The lighthouse tilted slightly as a wave slammed into its base, far stronger than any natural tide at this hour. Nathan looked down at the ocean. The water was rising. Too fast. Too high. Impossible. Figures stood just beneath the surface, dozens of them. Faces tilted upward, eyes glowing faintly. Waiting.
The storm of memory. Nathan understood then. This wasn't just repayment. It was a ritual, and his father had delayed it his entire life. Now the sea was collecting 2 debts at once. He grabbed tools, smashed the control circuits, tore at wires, but the lighthouse wouldn't stop. Every time he destroyed something, the lens seemed to rebuild itself, light flaring, glass vibrating like an enormous heartbeat. He realized with dizzying horror, the lighthouse wasn't a machine anymore. It was alive, and it wanted him. The door creaked, metal bending. The officer, or the thing wearing him, was pushing through. Nathan backed toward the lens. Wind howled through broken shutters, scattering papers and loose bolts. Another wave slammed the tower. The floor tilted dangerously. He saw one chance. A dangerous one. He grabbed a heavy wrench, lifted it above his head, and smashed it into the central lens. The glass exploded. Light burst outward like a dying star, blinding, burning, tearing through fog and sea air. A scream rose from below, not human, not singular, but a collective shriek of something ancient being wounded. The officer collapsed outside the door. The sea fell silent. Nathan collapsed too, panting, shaking, half-blinded. He had done it. He had broken the connection. Or so he thought. The sea's last claim. The silence lasted 10 seconds. Then the entire tower jolted violently. A wave taller than the cliff itself rose from the ocean. Impossible, massive, as if the Atlantic had chosen a single moment to exhale all its power. It crashed into the lighthouse with the force of a mountain. The floor beneath Nathan split open. He fell through shattered metal, tumbling down the spiraling staircase, hitting railings and stones before landing hard on the lower platform, vision blurring. Water flooded in instantly, cold as death. He staggered to his feet. The door to the outside was wide open now, ripped from its hinges. Through the churning water and foam, he saw her, the woman from the fog, standing calmly on the submerged rocks, dress rising and falling with the tide, eyes mournful. "It didn't have to be this way," she whispered, though her voice carried perfectly through the roaring sea. Nathan stood trembling, gripping a broken piece of railing like a weapon. "I won't go with you." Her expression softened, almost sad. "Every promise must be paid. The sea is patient. It waited for your father. It waited for you." It will wait for your son. Nathan felt the world tilt. I don't have a son. She smiled gently. You will? A cold shiver ripped through him. This is not the end, she said, stepping backward into the rising tide. This is only the tide turning. Then she dissolved into the water, pulled under without a ripple. The next wave slammed into Nathan, and everything went dark.
The morning after, he woke on the cliffside, coughing salt water, shivering violently. The lighthouse was half collapsed, the beacon shattered. Seagulls circled overhead, crying into the gray sky. No bodies, no footprints, no sign of the officer, no sign of the woman, only the sea. It looked normal, innocent, as if last night had been nothing but a fever dream. Nathan stood slowly, every muscle aching, and stared at the horizon. The ocean stared back. He left that day, sold the property, burned his father's journals except one page, the one containing the promise. He moved inland, far inland, married eventually, had a child eventually, a boy with gray-blue eyes. And sometimes, late at night, Nathan hears singing over the baby monitor. Soft, gentle, familiar. You have his eyes. Nathan always runs to check, but the nursery is always empty except for his sleeping son. The sea is patient. It will wait.